So the other day I had a bit of an interesting thought. What operating system would I use if Linux wasn't a thing? We sat down and thought about it, and it occurred to me I wouldn't go with the obvious choices of Windows or Mac OS. So in today's video I'm going to talk about exactly what operating system I would use if Linux wasn't a thing, right now on the Linux Lounge. Now first, to answer this question, we have to set up the scenario. When I say what would I use if Linux didn't exist, I don't mean what I would use if Linux never existed. If Linux never existed, the tech landscape would be a very different place from what it is now. No, instead what I mean is what would I use if Linux, by some sort of dark magic or something, disappeared off the face of the earth here and now. Well, at that point I'd see my options as either Windows, which, ew, or some other operating system that I'll get into in a bit. But before we get into that, let's just first quickly talk about Windows. If I had to switch, I'd absolutely miss all of the features that Linux has. However, it is possible to emulate many of them on Windows. For example, Windows has several package managers and a program that will give you a tiling-based window manager, to name a few of the features you can emulate on Windows. However, with that said, I still find using Windows to be a very frustrating and unpolished experience, so I wouldn't want to switch to if Linux just disappeared. And using Mac OS is totally out of the question. So with that said, what OS would I use? So to answer that question, first I have to say that I'm just very used to the Unix-like way of doing things. I don't think I could move away from that. So I think I definitely have to go with something that's very Unix-like, which thankfully there are several operating systems that fit that bill. But the one I'd personally go with is FreeBSD. The reason for that being is it's a lot like Linux in many ways. It works in a similar way, it runs a lot of the same software, and I think to the average end user they probably wouldn't notice much difference between BSD and Linux, assuming all of the programs that they needed to run ran on BSD. In fact, there are even things about BSD that I like better than Linux. For instance, it's a far more complete system, whereas Linux is just the kernel. But I suppose for most people that probably won't matter once you have your distribution installed. Another thing that I quite like about BSD is its more permissive license. You can do pretty much whatever you want with BSD, whereas with Linux there are sort of restrictions that, although they protect your freedoms, they can be quite annoying sometimes. But as a result of these license differences, BSD has become the base for a lot of different pieces of software. For example, Mac OS is based on BSD, and so is the operating system used on the PS4. I think the final thing that I prefer about BSD is the port software repository. It's absolutely huge. Not as big as something like the AUR, but for a smaller operating system it's really impressive just to see how many people package software for it and how much software there is available for it. In fact, there are only a handful of programs that I use that aren't available on BSD, and for the sake of curiosity I actually went ahead and made this very video on BSD. In fact, I'm willing to say this. If Linux disappeared tomorrow, I think the only things that I would miss about it that I can't get in BSD is the proprietary software I occasionally run, a few open source programs that haven't been packaged yet for BSD, and the superior hardware support that Linux has over BSD. In every other way, I think BSD is pretty much on par with Linux for my usage, if not better in some aspects, and I think given a few years, BSD is going to be a very compelling alternative to Linux. And with that said, that's it for today's little thought experiment video. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it and trying out BSD. Now I have to ask, well, what operating system would you use if Linux disappeared? Let me know in the comment section below, and while you're down there, consider following my link to join LBRY, the free and open source YouTube alternative. It really helps the show out. But with that said, I thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.